Maya never thought her father's wedding would be the day her entire life unraveled. As the vows are exchanged, a whispered secret sends her world spiraling out of control. Today wasn't just about new beginnings, it was about a truth that could destroy everything. Don't forget to like and share your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's jump into the story. Maya's heart raced as she stepped out of the sleek black sedan that had brought her to the countryside estate. It was a beautiful day, the sun filtering through the clouds, casting a soft golden hue over the sprawling lawns and towering oak trees that dotted the landscape. The estate, an old yet elegant mansion, was the kind of place Maya imagined people with perfect lives got married. The kind of place where everything seemed right on the surface, even if something was off beneath. She adjusted her navy blue dress, feeling the cool breeze graze her bare shoulders. Her reflection in the car window caught her eye, and for a moment she hesitated. She didn't recognize the person staring back at her, not today. This wasn't just any wedding. This was her father's wedding. And yet, everything about it felt foreign. Her father, David, had always been her rock, her unwavering support system. After her mother passed away when Maya was just 12 years old, it had been the two of them against the world. He raised her with patience, love, and dedication, navigating the difficult waters of grief and single parenthood. Maya had never doubted his love for her. They had always been close, bonded by their shared loss and their determination to keep moving forward despite it. But now, as she stood on the threshold of what was supposed to be one of the happiest days of his life, Maya couldn't help but feel an unsettling distance between them. The whirlwind romance with Sarah, the woman David was marrying today, had taken Maya by surprise. They had only been together for a year, and Maya had met Sarah a handful of times. Each interaction had been polite, cordial, but never deep. Maya didn't know her well enough to dislike her, but she didn't know her well enough to like her either. Sarah was everything Maya wasn't: polished, poised, and picture-perfect. She was a successful architect, always impeccably dressed and unfailingly composed. Even now, in her memory, Sarah stood like a glossy image ripped from a high-end magazine. Every interaction with her had felt like a performance, a rehearsed display of warmth that never fully reached her eyes. Maybe it wasn't about Sarah's race, Maya thought. Though, she couldn't deny that the dynamics of her father marrying a white woman added a layer of complexity. It wasn't that Maya had any problem with it. After all, love was love, and her father deserved happiness. But Maya couldn't help but feel as though she was losing her place in his life, that somehow, in this union, she was being written out of their story. Stop overthinking, Maya muttered to herself as she finally stepped forward toward the entrance of the estate. The ceremony was set to take place in the garden, where rows of white chairs lined a cobblestone pathway, leading up to an intricately decorated arch covered in white roses. Everything looked perfect, and the guests, milling about with smiles and laughter, only added to the fairy tale ambiance. But Maya's stomach churned with unease. As she took her seat in the front row, her eyes scanned the gathering crowd, recognizing a few familiar faces from her father's life, his colleagues, some old friends, and family members. The seat beside her was noticeably empty. Her mother's absence felt like a gaping hole in the day. Maya missed her more than ever. Her mother had been her confidant, her guiding light. She had always known what to say, how to make things feel right, even when the world felt upside down. But now, with her mother gone and her father about to marry someone new, Maya felt more alone than ever. Her thoughts were interrupted as the music began to play softly, signaling the start of the ceremony. David appeared first, looking as sharp as ever in his tailored suit. He smiled as he made his way to the front, but Maya noticed a hint of nervousness in his eyes. It wasn't the first time he'd been married, but there was something different about today. As the wedding party took their places, Maya's heart tightened in her chest. She glanced around, catching glimpses of the guests' faces. Everyone seemed so happy, so carefree. Everyone except her. Then came Sarah. The moment she stepped into view, the entire crowd seemed to collectively hold their breath. She was stunning, no doubt about it. Her white dress shimmered in the sunlight, her blonde hair cascading in perfect waves over her shoulders. She walked gracefully down the aisle, her smile radiating as she met David's gaze. Maya should have been happy for her father. This was his day, his moment of joy. But all she could feel was a growing sense of unease, a gnawing feeling that something wasn't right. The ceremony proceeded, with the minister speaking in soft tones about love, unity, and the sacred bond of marriage. Maya heard the words, but they felt distant, muffled, as if she were underwater. Her mind drifted back to memories of her mother, her laughter, her warmth, the way she could light up a room just by being in it. Her mother had been the glue that held their small family together, and when she passed, it felt like everything had shattered. Maya wondered what her mother would think of all this. Would she have approved of Sarah? Would she have been happy for David? Or would she, too, have felt this nagging sense of discomfort, this quiet dissonance that Maya couldn't shake? Just as Maya was about to let herself get lost in her thoughts entirely, a figure leaned in close to her. It was an older woman, a distant relative she vaguely recognized from family gatherings long ago. Her skin was creased with age, and her eyes glinted with something Maya couldn't quite place. "You don't know the full story, do you?" the woman whispered, her voice low and raspy, almost as if she didn't want to be heard. Maya's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman hesitated, her eyes darting around to make sure no one else was listening. Then, leaning in even closer, she murmured, "Your father wasn't always who he said he was. There are secrets, dear. Secrets that could change everything." Maya felt a cold chill run down her spine. She turned to look at the woman, searching her face for any sign of deceit, but all she saw was a cryptic smile, as though the woman knew something that Maya couldn't begin to comprehend. "What secrets?" Maya asked, her voice shaking slightly. But the woman only shook her head, patting Maya's hand softly before leaning back into her seat, leaving Maya with a mind full of questions and a heart full of doubt. She glanced up at her father, who was now holding Sarah's hands, preparing to say his vows. The look on his face was one of love and joy, but now Maya wasn't sure if she could trust it. Was this the man she had known all her life? Or was there something more, something darker, lurking beneath the surface? As the minister continued speaking, Maya's world seemed to tilt slightly, as though the foundation of everything she believed in was beginning to crack. A storm was brewing, and she could feel it in her bones. And she had a feeling that by the end of this day, nothing would ever be the same. The reception hall was buzzing with excitement, the kind that only came from a mix of champagne, well-dressed guests, and a perfectly executed ceremony. Maya's heart, however, wasn't in the celebration. She felt like she was floating through the room, detached from the laughter and clinking glasses. The cryptic words from the older woman echoed in her mind. "Your father wasn't always who he said he was." What could that even mean? She had always known her father to be honest, hardworking, and kind. Sure, there were the regular ups and downs, arguments here and there, but nothing out of the ordinary. The idea that he might be hiding something significant, something that could change everything, as the woman had implied, felt absurd. And yet, that strange chill wouldn't leave her. Maya glanced across the room to where her father stood with Sarah, their arms wrapped around each other as they greeted well-wishers. David was beaming, his smile wide and genuine. Maya's stomach twisted. She tried to dismiss the nagging feeling. This was her father, after all. The same man who had tucked her into bed every night, who had worked double shifts to pay for her ballet lessons, who had held her when they found out her mother was sick. Could he really be hiding something? The music from the live band swelled in the background, and Maya realized she hadn't eaten anything. The last thing she wanted was to faint at the reception. She made her way over to the buffet, picking up a plate and absent-mindedly grabbing a few things: cheese, crackers, fruit. Her mind was too preoccupied to care about what she was eating. "Maya, right?" A voice pulled her out of her thoughts. She looked up to see a man standing next to her. He was tall, wearing a sharp navy suit, with the kind of easy smile that instantly put people at ease. She didn't recognize him but assumed he was a friend of Sarah's. The guest list was filled with people from Sarah's life, most of whom Maya had never met. "Yeah," she replied, trying to muster a polite smile. "And you are?" "Daniel. I work with Sarah at the architecture firm. I actually met your dad a few times when they first started dating, he said, his voice friendly but not pushy. I've heard a lot about you. Sarah always talks about how much your dad cares for you. Maya forced a laugh. I guess he does. Daniel raised an eyebrow, sensing her unease. It's a big day, huh? Maya nodded, but she couldn't focus on the conversation. Her eyes drifted back to the older woman, sitting quietly at a table in the corner of the room, watching everything with a knowing expression. What had she meant by those words? Why say something like that right before the vows? Maya knew she should feel happy for her father, but she couldn't shake the growing sense that something was about to go wrong. Are you okay? Daniel asked, concern creeping into his voice. Maya blinked, suddenly aware that she had been zoning out. Yeah, sorry. There's a lot on my mind. He nodded understandingly. Weddings can be overwhelming, especially when it's family. She smiled weakly. You have no idea. As Daniel moved on to talk to other guests, Maya decided she couldn't take it anymore. She needed answers. The cryptic whisper from earlier had planted a seed of doubt that had grown into a gnawing anxiety she couldn't ignore. There was only one person who could help her make sense of it, her father. But confronting him now, in the middle of the reception, felt impossible. Maya was torn between wanting to pull him aside immediately and waiting until the night was over. Every time she looked at him, standing with Sarah, his arm draped over her shoulders as they accepted congratulations from guests, her heart ached. Was she being paranoid? Or was there truly something he had been hiding? Unable to stand still any longer, Maya found herself weaving through the crowd, making her way back to the quiet garden where the ceremony had taken place. The noise from the reception grew muffled as she stepped outside, the cool evening air hitting her skin and bringing a sense of calm. The sun had begun to set, casting a soft, orange glow over the horizon. Maya walked over to a stone bench and sat down, taking a deep breath. The garden, which had been filled with the buzz of excitement just hours ago, was now peaceful, serene. But her mind was anything but. Maya pulled out her phone and stared at the screen. She wanted to call someone, but who? Her best friend Jordan would tell her she was overthinking things. Her Aunt Lisa might listen, but she had always been distant from the family since her sister, Maya's mom, had passed. Maya swiped through her contacts aimlessly, eventually giving up and setting the phone down beside her. The door to the garden creaked open, and she looked up to see the older woman again, the same one who had whispered that haunting message during the ceremony. She hadn't expected to see her again so soon, and her stomach flipped at the sight. Mind if I join you? The woman asked, her voice soft but steady. Maya hesitated but nodded. The woman sat down beside her on the stone bench, her hands resting in her lap. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the distant murmur of the reception and the soft rustling of the wind through the trees. I'm sorry for what I said earlier, the woman began, breaking the silence. I didn't mean to upset you. Maya turned to face her, her heart racing. What did you mean by that? About my father not being who he says he is? The woman sighed, her expression filled with a kind of tired sadness. There are things your father hasn't told you. Things about his life before you were born. Maya frowned, confusion flooding her. What things? The woman looked down at her hands, her fingers trembling slightly. Your father had another family, Maya, before he met your mother. A wife. And a daughter. Maya felt as though the world had stopped turning. Her heart thudded in her chest, the words not fully registering in her mind. Another family? A wife? A daughter? No, that can't be right, Maya said, shaking her head. I would have known. He would have told me. The woman met her gaze, her eyes filled with a quiet intensity. He didn't tell you because he was afraid of losing you, but the truth always comes out, one way or another. Maya's mind raced. Her father had always been so open with her, or at least she thought he had. How could he have kept something like this hidden for so long? The idea of him having another family, of her having a half-sister out there somewhere, was almost too much to comprehend. Why are you telling me this? Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman sighed again, her gaze drifting off toward the horizon. Because you deserve to know the truth. And because the past has a way of catching up with us, no matter how hard we try to bury it. Maya's hands clenched into fists in her lap. She didn't know what to do with this information, didn't know how to process the sudden, violent shift in her reality. She wanted to confront her father, demand answers, but at the same time, she was terrified of what she might uncover. "I need to talk to him," Maya said, standing up abruptly. "I need to know if this is true." The older woman didn't stop her. She simply nodded, her expression unreadable as Maya turned and walked back toward the estate. The cool evening air nipped at her skin, but she barely felt it. Her mind was too busy spinning, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and anger. If what the woman said was true, then everything Maya thought she knew about her father, about her family, was a lie, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to face that truth. Maya's footsteps echoed across the stone path as she walked briskly toward the estate. The fading light of the evening did little to calm the storm swirling inside her. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what the woman had told her. Another family? A wife? A daughter? It was too big, too strange to even grasp. But one thing was clear. She needed to talk to her father. Right now. As she approached the large glass doors leading to the reception hall, she hesitated. Through the windows she could see the celebration in full swing. Guests were mingling, laughing, dancing. Sarah was at the center of it all, her white dress flowing as she twirled on the dance floor with David. They looked happy, blissfully unaware of the bombshell that had just been dropped on Maya. Her chest tightened as she watched them. How could her father stand there, smiling and laughing, as if nothing were wrong? As if he hadn't been keeping this massive secret from her all these years? It didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. But Maya was done questioning herself. She was done wondering. It was time for answers. She took a deep breath and pushed open the doors. The sudden change in atmosphere hit her like a wave. The noise of the reception, the music, the laughter, it all felt wrong, as if she were stepping into a world that no longer fit her. But she forced herself forward, her eyes locked on her father across the room. He hadn't noticed her yet, still caught up in the moment with Sarah. Her heart clenched. It felt wrong to do this now on his wedding day, but she couldn't wait any longer. This wasn't just about the wedding. This was about the truth. And the truth couldn't wait. Maya weaved through the crowd, dodging conversations and champagne flutes as she made her way to her father. When she was just a few steps away, she called out, "Dad?" David turned at the sound of her voice, his smile fading slightly when he saw the look on her face. "Maya? What's wrong?" She glanced around the crowded room. This wasn't the place for the conversation they needed to have. "Can we talk? In private?" David's brow furrowed with concern, but he nodded. He gently excused himself from Sarah, who was laughing with some friends nearby, and followed Maya out of the reception hall. They walked in silence through the estate, back to the garden where the ceremony had taken place earlier. The air was cooler now, the last traces of sunlight disappearing over the horizon, leaving the sky painted in deep purples and blues. When they reached the edge of the garden, near the stone bench where Maya had been sitting earlier, she stopped and turned to face him. Her heart pounded in her chest, and her throat felt tight, but she had to do this. "Maya, what's going on?" David asked, his voice gentle but filled with concern. "You're scaring me." She swallowed hard, her eyes searching his face for any sign that he might already know what she was about to ask. I spoke to someone today, at the wedding." David's expression shifted, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his features. "Okay. She told me something," Maya continued, her voice barely above a whisper now. "Something about you, about your past." David's face paled, and suddenly, Maya knew. She knew, without him saying a word, that the woman's story had been true. The truth was written all over his face. "Dad," Maya said, her voice trembling. "Is it true? Did you have another family, before me and Mom?" David's eyes closed for a long moment, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of the world had just been dropped onto him. When he finally opened them again, his gaze met hers, and the guilt in his eyes was unmistakable. "Yes," he said softly, "it's true." Maya felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under her. Even though she had suspected it, hearing him confirm it hit her like a punch to the gut. She stumbled backward, her mind reeling. "How?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "How could you not tell me? How could you keep this from me for so long?" David ran a hand through his hair, looking more vulnerable than Maya had ever seen him. "I wanted to tell you," he said, his voice thick with regret. "I did. But after your mother died, I didn't know how. I was afraid, Maya, afraid that if you knew, it would change everything between us. I didn't want to lose you." Maya shook her head, unable to believe what she was hearing. "So you just decided to lie? To pretend like none of it ever happened? You kept a whole other life from me, Dad, a whole other family." David took a step toward her, his hands outstretched as if to calm her down. "Maya, please. It wasn't like that. It's complicated." "Complicated?" Maya snapped, her voice rising. "How is this complicated? You lied to me for my entire life." Her father flinched at the harshness of her words, but he didn't argue. He knew she was right. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said quietly. "That's why I didn't tell you. I thought we could just move on, start fresh after your mother passed." Maya's heart ached at the mention of her mother. How could he have kept something like this from both of them? Did her mother know? Or had he lied to her too? "Does Sarah know?" Maya asked suddenly, her voice colder than she had intended. David's eyes dropped to the ground. "No, she doesn't." Maya felt a fresh wave of anger surge through her. "So you're still lying then? Even to your new wife?" David didn't answer, but the look on his face said it all. Maya turned away, her hands shaking as she tried to process everything. It was too much. Her father wasn't the man she thought he was. Her family wasn't what she thought it was. Everything she had believed, everything she had trusted, had been built on a lie. "I can't believe this," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "I can't believe you would do this to me." "Maya, please," David said, his voice desperate now. "I'm sorry, I should have told you, I know that now, but I never meant to hurt you." His words only made her feel worse. She had always trusted him. He had been her hero, the one constant in her life after her mother died. And now, that trust had been shattered. "How am I supposed to believe anything you say now?" Maya asked, her voice raw with emotion. "How am I supposed to trust you after this?" David looked at her, his eyes filled with pain. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. I promise." But Maya didn't know if there was any way to make this right. The damage had been done. The truth was out, and it had torn apart everything she thought she knew about her father, about their family. "I need time," she said finally, her voice hollow. "I need to figure this out." David nodded, his face lined with regret. "Take all the time you need. I'm here, whenever you're ready to talk." Maya didn't respond. She couldn't. She turned and walked away, her mind a blur of confusion and hurt. She didn't know where she was going, or what she was going to do next. All she knew was that the man she had trusted more than anyone in the world had just broken her heart. As she left the garden behind, she felt the weight of the truth pressing down on her, and she wasn't sure if she'd ever be able to forgive him. The world around Maya blurred as she left the garden, her vision swimming with unshed tears. The festive sounds of the wedding reception, the clinking glasses, the laughter, they all felt like a cruel joke now, as if life continued normally while hers was crumbling. Her legs carried her across the estate grounds, though she didn't know where she was headed. She just needed space. Space to breathe, to think, to feel something other than the gnawing ache of betrayal that hollowed out her chest. How could this be happening? The man she had idolized, her father, her rock, had lied to her. For her entire life. Maya found herself at the edge of the estate, near a small pond surrounded by willow trees. The quiet here felt like a stark contrast to the storm raging inside her. She dropped down onto a patch of grass by the water, staring blankly at the ripples on the surface. It was strange how everything seemed to carry on despite the world-shifting revelation she had just experienced. The pond didn't care that her father had lied. The wind still moved through the trees. The earth didn't stop spinning because her life had been shattered. Her mind raced, replaying the conversation with her father in a loop she couldn't escape. The words "another family" echoed in her head, growing louder and more painful with each repetition. A wife, a daughter, an entire life her father had kept hidden from her. And now, everything felt like a lie. Maya wrapped her arms around her knees, trying to hold herself together. But the truth was, she felt like she was unraveling. Her whole identity had been shaped by her relationship with her father. After her mother died, he had been her whole world. They had been a team, facing life's hardships together. She had trusted him completely, believing in the strength of their bond. And now she wasn't sure she knew him at all. Her phone buzzed in her lap, snapping her out of her thoughts. She glanced down and saw her father's name flashing on the screen. For a moment, she hesitated. The instinct to pick up and talk things through was strong. After all, that's what she had always done. When things got tough, it had always been her father she turned to. But now he was the source of her pain. She silenced the phone without answering, letting it fall back into her lap. She couldn't talk to him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The tears she had been holding back finally spilled over, hot and relentless. As the full weight of what she had learned settled on her shoulders, she felt foolish, betrayed, and completely unmoored. How could he have kept something like this from her? Did he think she wasn't strong enough to handle the truth? Or worse, did he think she didn't deserve to know? The questions swirled in her mind, each one more painful than the last. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, taking a shuddering breath. She needed answers. But at the same time, she wasn't sure she could handle any more revelations. If there was one hidden truth, who was to say there weren't more? What else didn't she know about her own life, her own family? The quiet rustle of footsteps behind her made her turn. She blinked through her tears to see Sarah standing a few feet away, her white dress shimmering faintly in the moonlight. For a moment, Maya's heart lurched. She hadn't expected to see her. "I saw you leave," Sarah said softly, her voice full of concern. "I wanted to make sure you were okay." Maya quickly wiped at her eyes, trying to hide her tears, but there was no point. The emotions were too raw to mask. "I'm fine," she lied, her voice shaky. Sarah stepped closer, her expression soft and genuine. "You don't seem fine. Is it something I did, or something your dad did? I know today's been a lot." Maya bit her lip, unsure of what to say. Sarah didn't know. She had no idea about the secret her new husband had been hiding, no clue about the weight of the truth that had just crushed Maya's world. And for some reason, that made it even harder. The fact that Sarah was in the dark too, the fact that she had married a man who wasn't fully honest with her, made Maya's heart ache even more. It's not you," Maya said, her voice barely audible. "It's just, I don't know what to do." Sarah sat down beside her, folding her hands in her lap. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence filled only by the soft breeze and the distant hum of the reception. "You know, when I first met your dad," Sarah began, her voice low and thoughtful, "he talked about you a lot. He told me how close you two were, how proud he was of you. I always admired that about him, the way he cared for you, the way he put you first." Maya felt a bitter laugh rise in her throat. She swallowed it down, but the irony of Sarah's words wasn't lost on her. He had put her first, except when it came to the truth. He had shielded her, but in doing so, he had also betrayed her. "I know today must be hard," Sarah continued, glancing at Maya. "It's a big change, but your dad? He loves you. I've never seen him so happy as when he talks about you." Maya nodded, unable to respond. She didn't doubt that her father loved her. She had always known that. But love wasn't enough to erase the pain of what he had done. Love didn't make the lies disappear. After a long pause, Sarah's voice grew softer, more tentative. "Did something happen today, between you and your dad?" Maya hesitated. She didn't want to burden Sarah with the truth, especially not today, on her wedding day. But the weight of the secret was crushing, and Maya couldn't carry it alone anymore. He told me something," Maya finally admitted, her voice quiet. "Something I didn't know about him, about our family." Sarah's brows furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" Maya felt her throat tighten again, but she forced the words out. "He had another family, before me and Mom, a wife, and a daughter." Sarah's eyes widened in shock, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. "I had no idea." Maya nodded, her tears threatening to spill over again. "Neither did I." For a moment, the two women sat in silence, the enormity of the revelation hanging heavy between them. Sarah looked as shaken as Maya felt, her face pale and her eyes wide with disbelief. "I don't know how to process this," Maya said, her voice breaking. "It feels like my whole life was a lie. I don't even know who my father is anymore." Sarah placed a gentle hand on Maya's shoulder, her touch warm and reassuring. "I'm so sorry, Maya. I can't imagine what you're going through. But whatever happens, I'm here for you. We'll figure this out together. Maya appreciated Sarah's words, but they didn't ease the ache in her chest. This wasn't something anyone else could fix. This was between her and her father, and no amount of reassurance could undo the damage that had been done. I don't know if I can forgive him, Maya whispered, more to herself than to Sarah. I don't know if I even want to. Sarah sighed, her expression softening. It's okay to feel that way. It's okay to be angry. You don't have to make any decisions right now. Just take your time. Maya nodded, though the idea of forgiveness felt impossible at the moment. The wounds were too fresh, the betrayal too deep. But deep down, she knew that eventually she would have to face her father again. Eventually they would have to talk. But for now, Maya just needed to breathe. She needed to let herself feel the hurt, the confusion, the anger, and she needed to figure out who she was in the aftermath of the truth. As the stars began to dot the night sky, Maya leaned back against the grass, staring up at the vast, dark expanse. The world felt bigger now, more uncertain, but somehow, sitting there beside Sarah, she felt a small sense of comfort. Maybe the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Maybe the truth would continue to haunt her for a long time. But for now, she had someone by her side. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The next few days were a blur for Maya. She had left the wedding early, her mind too tangled in emotions to stay and celebrate with the rest of the guests. The joy of the day had been stolen by the revelation of her father's secret, and she couldn't force herself to pretend everything was okay. Back in her apartment, the silence was overwhelming. No calls, no texts. She had shut everyone out, including her father. The space between them was now more than just physical. It was emotional, a gap that felt impossible to bridge. She spent hours staring at her phone, his name lighting up the screen with every missed call, but she couldn't bring herself to answer. What would she say? What could she say? For the first time in her life, Maya felt truly alone. The foundation she had built her identity on, the image of her father as the perfect protector, the one who had always been honest and true, was cracked beyond repair. She didn't know how to move forward, didn't know if she even wanted to. On the fourth day, a knock at the door broke through the stillness of her apartment. At first she ignored it, assuming it was a neighbor or a package delivery. But when the knocking persisted, a sense of dread crept into her chest. She knew who it was before she even opened the door. Her father stood there, looking older than she had ever seen him. His face was drawn, his eyes tired, and for a moment, Maya could see the weight of guilt and regret he had been carrying. He had always been her rock, but now he looked like a man who had been hollowed out by his own mistakes. "Maya," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "Can we talk?" Maya hesitated, her hand gripping the doorframe. Part of her wanted to slam the door in his face to avoid the conversation she knew was coming. But another part of her, the part that still loved him despite everything, couldn't bring herself to do it. With a sigh, she stepped aside and let him in. David walked into the small living room, his eyes scanning the space as if searching for some clue, some sign of how badly he had hurt her. Maya stayed by the door, crossing her arms over her chest, not ready to close the physical distance between them just yet. The silence stretched out uncomfortably, the air heavy with the things left unsaid. "I'm sorry, Maya," David said finally, turning to face her. His voice was low, raw. "I know I can't take back what I did. I know I broke your trust. And I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need you to understand, I never meant to hurt you." Maya's jaw clenched. She had heard those words before. "I never meant to hurt you." They felt hollow now, empty in the face of the betrayal she felt. "How long were you planning on keeping it from me?" she asked, her voice icy. "Were you ever going to tell me?" David's shoulders sagged. "I don't know," he admitted. "After your mother died, I thought, maybe it was better if we just moved on. I was afraid if I told you the truth, you'd hate me." Maya's heart twisted. The pain in his voice was real, but it didn't make it any easier to hear. "I don't hate you," she said quietly, "but I don't know if I can trust you anymore." David flinched at the words, but he didn't argue. He knew better than to make excuses. "I deserve that," he said. "I understand, but I want to try to fix this. I want to earn your trust back if you'll let me." Maya shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. "How, Dad? How do we fix something like this? You lied to me for my entire life. You had another family, a daughter. Did you ever think about what that would do to me? To Mom? David's face crumpled with guilt. I thought I was protecting you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what I thought. I was scared. The tears spilled over, and Maya wiped at them furiously, angry at herself for crying. I deserve to know, she choked out. I deserve to know the truth, Dad. You took that from me. I know, he said, stepping toward her, his eyes pleading, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Maya let out a shaky breath, her emotions swirling in a confusing mix of anger, sadness, and love. She had spent the last few days feeling like the world had shifted beneath her feet, and now, standing in front of her father, she realized that the ground was still unsteady. There was no easy answer here, no magic solution that would make everything go back to the way it was. But even as her heart ached with the weight of what he had done, she knew she couldn't hold on to the anger forever. It wasn't in her nature. She loved her father. That love hadn't disappeared just because he had made a terrible mistake. But trust, that was a different matter. I don't know how to fix this, she said finally, her voice breaking. I don't even know if we can, but I can't do this right now. David's face fell, but he nodded. I understand, he said quietly. I'll give you space, as much as you need. Maya looked down at the floor, her tears still flowing. I need time. I need time. David stepped closer, his hand reaching out as if to comfort her, but he stopped himself, letting his arm fall back to his side. Take all the time you need, Maya, he said. I'll be here when you're ready. I love you, and I'll never stop trying to make this right. Maya didn't answer. She couldn't. Her heart felt too heavy, her mind too clouded by the enormity of everything that had happened. She watched as her father turned and walked toward the door, his shoulders hunched with the weight of his regret. Before he left, he paused in the doorway, glancing back at her one last time. I'm sorry, he whispered, the words barely audible. And then he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him, and Maya stood there, her tears falling silently as the full reality of their conversation settled over her. She wasn't sure what the future held for their relationship. She wasn't sure if the bond they had shared could ever be fully repaired. But for now, she needed to heal. She needed to find her own way through the pain, on her own terms. As the apartment grew quiet again, Maya sank onto the couch, staring at the empty space where her father had stood. The love she had for him was still there, buried beneath the hurt and the betrayal. But trust, once broken, was hard to rebuild. She wasn't sure if they would ever get back to where they had been before. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. But for now, she just needed to breathe. She needed to let herself feel the hurt, the anger, and the confusion, without rushing to forgive, without pretending everything was okay. Because it wasn't. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward finding peace. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Click on the video now to watch. We appreciate your support, and we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments.